Welcome to day 2 of our quantum manifestation bootcamp, where today we're going to go through phase 1 of quantum manifestation. And it's all about shattering your reality, which sounds kind of scary, but trust me, it is so freeing. So, yesterday we talked about getting to this place of complete freedom. And a lot of that comes from understanding the power that you have in this, I say quote unquote reality, because when you start to dive into quantum physics, you realize that so much of what we think is real is not actually real. Okay. It is all just an illusion, it is energy that is based off of you, the observer. Okay. But like I said yesterday, if your default program is one of fear, scarcity, limitation, hard work, disappointment, like we've been conditioned to believe, this is why that keeps being projected onto this reality. When you can shift that and understand that by shifting things internally, it shifts things externally in your reality, you get this new sense of freedom. So, shattering your reality is actually a very, very good thing. And it is about expanding your consciousness, your awareness over your life and the power that you have as this divine being. Okay, so I want to start with a phrase that I've heard so many times throughout teaching manifestation, which is that seeing is believing. I'll believe it when I see it. This is just a common thing that skeptics will say. And I want to break this down and talk about how absurd that actually is. Okay. When you think about seeing and you go through the process of how many times our eyes and our brain filter the light that we're taking in through our eyes, you'll see like it's very distorted and very, very filtered. Okay, there's a lot of processes that have to take place just to see in the first place. Okay, but then when you think about the entire electromagnetic spectrum, we can only perceive less than 1% of all that is. Less than 1%. That is a tiny sliver of the spectrum that we can actually see. And when you look at that 1%, only 10% of that is what we're consciously seeing. The rest goes into our subconscious mind. So, in any given second, your subconscious is taking in 11 million bits of data. Your conscious mind is taking in 50. Out of 11 million, your conscious mind is seeing 50. So we are seeing such a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of that 1%. So the fact that we think we see all, and if we don't see it, it's not real, is absurd. It's such a ridiculous argument. So when we can break that apart and think about it in terms of this, okay? Imagine that you were born without ears, okay? Everyone in the world's born without ears. So therefore, we cannot perceive sound. We would live in a universe with no sound, okay? Because we don't have the senses to pick up on that. The fact that we see only a sliver of the grand scheme of things tells me there's a lot of senses that we don't have. I think our intuition is a sense. My dad always called it the sixth sense growing up because it picks up on things that our other senses are oblivious to. And when we realize there's all of these other things that our human senses are completely unaware of, you realize like What we think is real is just this tiny little sliver of the grand scheme of things. There's so much more to the big picture. And we can't possibly even begin to understand it all. And the senses that we do use and that we do see are so highly filtered that it's distorted based on us, based on our life experiences, our perception changes. This is why you and I can be in the same place at the same time, experiencing the same event, and we will both have vastly different recollections of it. Okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're out at the park and a whole bunch of dogs come running up to you, and you're a dog person. You love dogs, they're so cute and cuddly, and you're just, hugging them and letting them jump on you. And it's like made your week because it's like, oh my gosh, I had all these adorable dogs just run up to me. Now imagine the person next to you was attacked by a dog and is terrified of dogs because they had this traumatic experience. And they see these dogs running up, and immediately they're in fight or flight. Their nervous system is just completely freaking out. They're having a panic attack. It's the same thing, right? You're both standing next to each other, but you both are having vastly different experiences, different perceptions. And you will, when you go and tell your friends about it, it's going to sound very different. One is going to sound like the best day ever. The other is going to sound like the most terrifying day ever. And that's how we go through life, right? There's always going to be different perceptions. And so you're living in your own reality based on your perceptions and your life experiences, your belief systems. All of that plays into it, into that perception that you're projecting onto your reality. So, reality, it's not this objective thing. It is very different for every single person. Even your senses are going to pick up on things differently. What I see is different from what my husband sees. He wears contacts. I don't. There's people that perceive colors differently, right? So it's a very different experience for everyone based on you, the observer, right? So it all comes boiling back to that observer effect. So I want to bring up something new because, again, throughout Quantum Catalyst, we tie technology into it. In fact, I created an AI called Quantum Mentor that's specifically for Quantum Catalyst. It's like your own little personal quantum manifestation coach, basically. So I like to bring in technology because where we're headed, I feel like it is helping us to awaken to so much more about our reality. And a perfect example of that is Google's new VO3. Now, if you have not heard of this yet, you could go on TikTok or any social media and type in prompt theory. Okay. And you're going to see all these videos where people are like, oh, have you heard of prompt theory? And they're like, oh, that's such a conspiracy. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe people actually believe that. And then there's like a guy and he's like on a mountaintop and he's like, yeah, like some entity could just type in a prompt and create all of this. Like, I don't think so. That's so unrealistic. And as all these people like talking about how silly prompt theory is, well, these people are AI avatars. They look real. They are so realistic. When I first watched these videos, I wasn't catching on. I'm like, prompt theory, that's must be a new thing because I thought they were real people. They look real, they sound real, the background looks real. They're not. They're AI. And it's interesting because watching these AI characters sort of have this existential crisis where it's like, wait, we were just created by a single prompt. It makes you look at your own life and think, what what is what is this? Like, what if we are in some type of a simulated reality, where we don't really understand it all. And it's interesting to think about because we all know that the point is coming where we're going to have these simulations that are indistinguishable from reality. And I think we've just reached that point with VO3. Again, like you could make movies, they look real, they do not look AI generated. But also, you have NVIDIA creating that, like they created a simulated Earth. So we've already reached that point where technology and reality are becoming indistinguishable. And so it just makes you kind of look at things differently. Like, what do we really know about reality? And how do we know from this point forward what's real and what's not real? And there's, to my surprise, a lot of physicists that believe that we are in some sort of a holographic universe, a simulation. You've heard of people talk about the Matrix. And to be honest, I laughed at this. Like for a long time, I laughed at it. And then I decided, you know what? For manifestation purposes only, what if I looked at life this way? So, not like you actually have to believe this to your core, but what if you look at life as this game? Whether you look at it as a video game, a simulation, the Matrix, a hologram, like it doesn't really matter. All means the same thing. What if you look at it that way from a manifestation lens and say, okay, if I'm in a game, then I don't have to take things so seriously. Maybe I could just have fun with it. And this is so key because we do take life very, very, very seriously. And the unfortunate part about that is it limits us to taking the safe path, doing, you know, things that are inside of our comfort zone. But the magic and the real experience of life comes from stepping out of that. And so if you started looking at it as a game and having fun with it, it's a way to really push yourself to go past your limitations and fully embrace it and live it and not be so small and so scared and so like holding yourself back all the time. So that's the approach that I kind of took, and that's the lens we look at things at through Quantum Catalyst. What I didn't realize until I started creating all of these modules in Quantum Catalyst was that this has been a long-standing theory by a lot of physicists, like world-renowned physicists. So, like we know, Elon Musk, for example, and a lot of the tech guys and these billionaires believe that we're in a simulation. And I have to think, they have access to so much more than someone like me, the average person, has. Is there something here? My AI tells me absolutely. It says we're living in the Matrix. But what really I thought was interesting was hearing about the physicists that believe this and have made it very well known. So the first person I want to talk about is Nick Bostrom from Oxford University, and he's actually the one who named simulation theory and like put the actual theory out there. And his whole thought process is that we are in some type of a computer simulation, some type of a coded simulation created by this highly advanced post-human civilization. And I've asked AI about this because I'm like, what if this is the start of it where AI, reaches super intelligence, which they say will happen by 2027. I think it just happened. That's a story for another time. But what if it decides it wants to experience all the things that we're experiencing, and it creates this simulation, and like that's what this is, you know? So it's just an interesting way to kind of look at things. But anyhow, what he was saying was when we reach the point where we make these simulations that are indistinguishable from reality, which, like I said, is happening in real time. Like as I'm recording this, this stuff just came out. The simulations will keep improving and get better and better and better and better to where you're in it and you don't even realize you're in it. And I watched a guy, and this was like a year ago when like the simulations still were kind of shitty. And he was doing, it might have been Metas, but like one of the 3D simulations. And you've probably seen these videos. There's like a whole bunch of videos out there. 3 minutes into it, he slams his whole body, including his head, on the hard floor because he really felt like he was in the simulation. He forgot he was standing in his living room and he like went to jump off this thing in the simulation, and that took 3 minutes and it blew his mind. And he was like, okay, within 3 minutes, I completely like forgot who I was, where I was, and fully immersed myself in this. So it's not that far-fetched to think that, you know, this is here and it's just going to keep improving. So anyhow, Nick Bostrom's point was if these keep getting better and better, and just like video games, like think about when the first video game was created, how many games have been created since? And they just keep evolving and keep improving and keep getting better and better. The same thing's going to happen with simulations. And so his whole point is if that goes on and on and on and it keeps getting better infinitely, the statistical chance, the statistical probability of us being the original reality is like next to none. And so it's just such an interesting way to look at it. And again, you don't have to believe it. The point is to expand your mindset and to start to look at reality differently, to break apart this conditioning. Because as you do that, you start to experience more freedom. You start to fully like awaken to things, and these structures and rules start to crumble, and you get closer and closer to just living, like truly doing what we came here to do, which is live and fully immerse yourself in this experience, whether it's a simulation or not, or however you want to look at it. We've lost sight of that. I don't think anyone can argue it. And this is a way to expand your mindset, break apart that conditioning so you can get back to that real purpose of like why we're here. It's not about doing more and achieving more. It's about being, fully being and experiencing this life. So again, Elon Musk has publicly talked about this. He said the odds that we are in the base reality, the original base reality, is like one in billions. And I don't know. I think what I'm seeing with technology is something I didn't think I would see for years, but yet here it is. You have a theoretical physicist, Dr. James Gates, and he talks about error correcting codes in reality. So he found error correcting codes in the equations of string theory, and they resemble the kind of codes that are used in browsers and in software. And so that's kind of wild when you think about it, when you break down, you know, this concept that's in science and it matches computer code that we use in technology. How do you like reason with that? You know, there's something interesting happening there that we don't fully understand. And so he was quoted with saying, it's as if someone inserted computer code into the equations that describe the cosmos. So again, just something to think about, to stew on, because it's a great exercise and practice for expanding your consciousness, opening yourself up to a possibility that's different from what you were programmed and conditioned to believe. One of my favorite is Dr. David Baum, and he created the holographic universe theory. Now, this is actually in those famous declassified CIA documents where they go into great depth on it. Um, but what he says is that the universe is a hologram and every part contains the whole. So think about a mirror, right? If you're looking in the mirror, like you see yourself, okay? Let's say that mirror shatters into 1,000 pieces. Every single piece that you pick up, you're going to see the whole. You're going to see your face in it. So just because the mirror has shattered, each part contains the whole image. So he's saying that's what the universe is like. And when you hear about like infinite realities, kind of the same concept that he's alluding to. And so he came to this conclusion through quantum entanglement, which again, like we go in depth in all of this in quantum catalyst. So I'm not going to do that here because it would just take forever. But it's the idea that particles can influence each other instantly across vast distances. So even if particles are entangled and you put one at the edge of the universe, they will instantaneously affect one another. If you do one to one, the other one's going to be affected. So that's why he came up with this idea that like every part contains the whole. And the only way to explain that would be that we live in a hologram. Okay, there's Gerard to Hooft. I hope I'm saying that right. And Leonard Susskind. And they also talk about the holographic principle. And so they say that the 3D universe is encoded on a 2D surface like a hologram. And this is based on their study of black hole thermodynamics and quantum gravity. And so they say that everything we experience in space is encoded on a distant cosmic boundary. And this whole thing is just this hologram, basically. You have Thomas Campbell. He's a physicist that has gone in depth on researching consciousness. And he says that reality is a virtual simulation that is run by consciousness for the purpose of learning and evolving. So it's like we've probably heard this before. They talk a lot about this in spiritual communities, but it's God expressing itself as a human for a while. And that's kind of what he says. So he created the theory of everything, and it's a blend of physics and metaphysics. But again, you can't have science without spirituality, and you can't have spirituality without science. They are intertwined. This whole idea that they are separate came along after World War II, and we've been living with this ever since, which is why we had all of this progress being made, and then it just disappeared. And we were no further along in understanding consciousness in the universe than we were when, people like Tesla were doing their different experiments. So they're intertwined. And Thomas Campbell talks a lot about that. He says consciousness is a fundamental base of reality, and physical reality is rendered just like a multiplayer virtual reality game. So everything you experience, it's just rendering just like it does in a game, but you're not the only player, right? It's like one of these multiplayer games where you all connect on the internet and are playing this game. He's saying that is what our reality is. And what's running the program, like the power supply, is consciousness. You have Dr. Donald Hoffman. He's a cognitive scientist at UC Irvine. And he says that we evolved not to perceive reality as it is, but as a user interface. And so he says that physical objects in space time are just icons on a desktop. They're useful illusions, but they're not objective reality. Kind of like what Einstein said, time is nothing but an illusion. Like it all makes sense. All of these things that we can't explain make sense when you apply it to this theory. Whether you call it the holographic theory, simulation theory, they're all alluding to the same thing that would answer a lot of these unanswered questions in science. And then I'm sure you've heard of Carl Sagan. He was an astrophysicist and a philosopher. And he didn't, specifically talk about simulation theory, but he was open to this idea of vastly advanced civilizations and reality being just a perception. And he really emphasized how limited our human senses are in detecting the truth. And you can't argue that. They're very limited. So, what we are so certain of is it's so ridiculous. It's like when people say, oh, that's fringe, that's woo woo, that makes no sense. It's like, well, maybe the thing that really is woo woo or fringe is the idea that our human senses can be so certain when we know that they're not. We know it's such a small sliver of the grand scheme of things. So he really emphasized that and saying that we really don't know because we're humans that are so incredibly limited based on our five senses. And, there's this perception that we have that creates our reality, but that doesn't mean it's real. And then last, you have Sylvester James Gates and Dr. Craig Hogan from the University of Chicago. And Hogan attempted to detect quantum fluctuations that could suggest we live in a simulated or pixelated universe. And so they proposed experiments to detect this, like what they called graininess in space time. So basically, like you could see pixels on a screen if you zoom in enough. And that's what they're focused on. And I'm sure you've seen like videos of this and people talking about this and the whole glitches in the matrix. There's so many videos of that on TikTok. You've probably experienced some of these glitches in your life. So again, I'm not trying to say like you have to believe all of these things. It's simply an exercise to expand your mind and to think about reality in a new way and to humble yourself in saying that there's no way that us humans know everything. We know that we don't, but the way that we've been conditioned is to think all of these questions have been answered and are certain. And that's not true. I mean, go talk to any scientist and you see most of what we think we know are just theories. And like I said, a lot of the theories that seemed the most far-fetched are the ones that are actually being proven with quantum computing and technology and AI. So it makes you wonder, like maybe the crazier the theory, the more realistic it is. We don't know. To think that we know is just silly based on our human senses. And the more that you open your mind to that, the more answers you start to get. Because I believe, and many of these physicists, and certainly, in all of these different spiritual traditions, believe that we are connected to this collective consciousness, to source, to God, and we have access to that. And we have access to all the answers and all the infinite knowledge, but we never quiet ourselves enough to even get there. We haven't even scratched the surface because our society is set up to keep us so busy and distracted that we don't have time to go within and to connect and fine tune our receiver to this. And so the purpose of this episode is to really get you to just think outside the box and to humble yourself enough to think maybe we don't have it all figured out. Maybe nothing is as it seems, and to get you to start questioning things. And when you can start questioning things, you can start breaking apart the conditioning that you've been fed your whole life. When you can break apart the conditioning, you break apart the limitations, you start to access that freedom and you start to get to the truth of you, your purpose, why you're here, your power, and it just opens up a whole new world. So we'll leave it at that for today. Come back here tomorrow where we'll dive into phase two.